What's up, guys? Welcome back to Newswave. So about an hour and a half from when this video goes up, we will have that Pokemon Direct, and I'm sure I'll be tweeting about it, and unless something crazy major happens, maybe like Pokemon Snap 2, I'll probably be covering a lot of that information in tomorrow's Newswave, so make sure you subscribe down below to keep up to date on that. But today we still have a bunch of stuff to go over, which does include a Game Boy Advance console, Game Boy Advance, Game Boy Color console that's been revealed. We'll talk a bit about what that is exactly, and then also it looks like the PlayStation 5 still has some more tricks up their sleeves there, as Sony talked a bit about some unique and big features that have yet to be revealed, so we'll talk about that and more today, guys. As always, if you enjoy these videos, make sure you hit that like button. It helps out a lot. You guys have been doing so, and it has been helping the videos quite a bit, so I do appreciate it. And make sure you are subscribed if you're new here, down below with that red button so you can stay up to date on all the gaming news going on in the gaming world. We're going to start with Stadia today, Google Stadia, which I think a lot of people kind of forgot about Google Stadia, unless that's just me. I feel like a lot of people have kind of forgotten about that and moved on. They need a big game. They need a big exclusive game to really bring people back and get back in the news, I think, because at this point, we just kind of talk about the one or two games that they add to their service for like the pro members, and that's it. Maybe it'll be a bit more interesting for people when it goes free. Well, you still have to buy the game, but free for the service part next year at some point. But it looks like the Google Stadia version of Destiny 2 has seen a bit of a decline in its player base. Now, Forbes had an article that went over everything here, goes over the different numbers, and it looks like compared to launch, where it was about 19,000 users, it's actually dropped to just over 8,000 users at this point at the beginning of January. So a very rapid decline in just under 2 months is what we're seeing here now. And that is, well, it's not good, obviously, for Google Stadia, because that should be a service-based game that would keep people on your servers and, using your service. However, there are probably a lot of people who just got Google Stadia, saw Destiny 2, tried it out, and just kind of moved on from there. That's all I can assume at this point. Or maybe there are people who were big Destiny 2 people, moved over to it, played it and said, oh, that's cool, and then took their Destiny 2 account back to like another, their regular console or PC that they were playing on. However, if Destiny 2 is not able to keep people on board, it's gonna be curious to see what third party could. I think it comes down to, for me anyway, get a good exclusive game and people should show up to your service. Also, we had kind of made fun of the logo that PlayStation revealed, the PS5 logo during CES, mostly because it was just one of the most underwhelming reveal. We knew what it was going to be. I mean, come on. We pretty much knew they were going to erase the 4 in Paint and then drop a 5 in there in the same font, and there's PS5, right? Well, it seems like the logo actually took the internet by storm. I don't know if it was because people were laughing at it or making fun of it or going, oh, yep, I saw that one coming. Well, on Instagram, as you're seeing, it actually did over 5 million likes, which, believe it or not, that seems to set a record for a post from a game company. I mean, it's kind of a specific sector, right? On Instagram, game company, but still over 5 million likes shows a lot of interest online around a PS5 logo. What I think that shows is just a lot of interest and excitement on PlayStation 5 news in general. We want to see what this thing is, and a lot of that has to do with us already knowing what the Series X is going to be. What is this PS5 though? Because at this point, we seem to know more and more about the dev kit every few weeks than we do about the main system itself. Also, we had been following the Switch throughout 2019 in the Famitsu sales charts. We lost Media Create, but we still have Famitsu, and we've been following it from time to time as big games came out, as big weeks were expected to see how it would sell, which of course would work to increase the overall install size, which would work to then get games for Nintendo's platform. Well, it seems like Nintendo's system, the Switch, was not really slowing down, and in 2019, it actually accounted for 80% overall of Japan's sales for video games. Yeah, it's pretty crazy. There were several tweets put out, as you see here. These were from Oscar Lemaire, who went over all of this. Seemed about 76% were for the Switch, and the other 4 or so was for the 3DS and a few other little things from Nintendo. A big deal there, because this goes all the way back to the beginning when Famitsu was tracking these sales numbers in 1999, and this was the biggest year for Nintendo for console sales total. So about 76%, right, or console sales. Big time, like taking over that big slice of the pie, even against the PS4. While that is on the decline, it's still a pretty big deal for Nintendo to really overtake Japan so much, and it really just shows how appealing just the Switch is pretty much in Japan, but if you look at in the West, it's also winning every NPD. It's coming in #1, and yeah, it shows you how big of a hit Nintendo has on their hands right now with the Switch, and it makes you wonder what they have going forward for what could end up being their biggest install size for a home console ever. And guys, with some of the quick news out of the way, let's get into the bigger stuff. Let's start with this Game Boy Advanced, Game Boy Color. I mean, it can play all of the Game Boy games pretty much. Let's start with this Game Boy Color, Game Boy Advance, Game Boy console. It's from Hyperkin. It's called the Retron Junior. It was unveiled at CES. Gizmodo had a ton of pictures for this thing, because originally it was getting kind of passed around what it was called, but then I came across Gizmodo, and they seem to have some close-ups of the system, and I wanted to go over some of it here, but here is the system in question, and this is from Hyperkin. A couple of years ago, they had kind of like an April Fool's joke for this, and it was a shame because people really would like a different alternative over like the GameCube or even the Retron 5, because the best way to put the Retron 5 would be unfortunate. The Retron 5 isn't bad for the amount of variety that it offers, but the quality, to me anyway, is not great. But that Game Boy Advance slot on the front is very enticing for a lot of people who just want to play Game Boy Advance games on their TV without having to get a GameCube, and then of course the GameCube adapter on the back from Eon, and it ends up being a fairly expensive endeavor. So the idea of this system, the Retron Junior, that hopefully will be fairly cheap with HDMI out, is a cool idea. We still have to wait for pricing and some of the functionality, but as you're seeing, we have some buttons on the front, what start and reset, big buttons by the way. We have the headphone jack there with a volume slider, and then on the back, we have HDMI, USB-C for power, then we have AV ports for composite, so there were some people who wanted those. I saw it on Twitter. It does appear to have those. If I guess you want to hook it up to like a CRT, you can do that to kind of get that old school early 2000s look that you would have got from like the GameCube at the time. And you know what? I do like the look of this system. On the front, they have a USB Type-A port. According to them, it's going to work with a Super Nintendo controller that they have, I guess they would package with it, although it does appear that they're trying to figure out if it's going to be wired or wireless. Don't mess it up, Hyperkin. Make it wireless. In fact, make it so it's Bluetooth and it can still sync to other ones, because I would like to use the 8-bit Do controller straight up. I think that'd be better anyway, so if that option's there, great. I'm sure they want to sell their own controllers, so they probably won't, but if it can take inputs through that USB port on the front, 8-bit Do I know sells an adapter that'll let you sync it up anyway. Now, this is going to be done through emulation. That's something else that was put out there. It's not going to be like an FPGA chip like we've seen with analog. So the question now comes, of course, are there going to be glitches with certain games? Will there be input lag? Those are all things we need to see. According to them, it's going to output 720p to a flat screen, or of course, it'll put out composite for any of your big tube TVs that most kids now have no idea exist anymore, right? So I'm excited for the idea of this if the pricing is good. The pricing I'm looking for is somewhere between $40 and $60 straight up. So if it's more than 60, it's a little too much. But if it comes in right between at like $50, I think that's a good price for playing Game Boy Advance, Game Boy, and Game Boy Color games, considering that the Retron 5 is roughly $130 or so on Amazon. I think making it less than half of that will be able to sell this better. I do like the look of it, the cube. I think that's cool. That's a cool look. I like that it's kind of top loading. You drop it in the top and then you go. That's neat as well. Now, most likely this will work like the Retron 5 does, where you pop the game in, it rips it, and then it plays it through an emulator. That's basically how it works there. It takes like a minute to pull the game off of the cartridge, the ROM, and then it goes. That, of course, enables things like save states, filters, and all kinds of stuff that they can use through that emulator that's probably an open source emulator they are using. They came under fire for that with the Retron 5 as well. But still a lot of questions with this system when it comes to pricing and functionality with the controller, but I like the idea. And we'll just have to see. Apparently, it's launching this year in 2020. And remember, we still have that Analog Pocket, which looks killer, but it might be a bit too expensive for some people. So the idea of a cheaper alternative that you just play on your TV for your Game Boy Advance will probably work for some people. Next up, let's talk about the PlayStation 5 a little bit. We assume there will be some sort of event in the next month or two. Remember, with the PlayStation 4, they had an event where they went over a lot of technical stuff with Mark Cerny, and that was in February, towards the end of February. So I could see something happening later on this month. I could see something happening midway through next month. I don't think they'll wait till March. And then, of course, we'll have E3 where there should be a big blowout of games from Microsoft, Sony, and Nintendo all at once. Gonna be a really fun E3, I think, for 2020. So we'll want to tune into that, obviously. But let's talk about what Jim Ryan had to say to Business Insider Japan, where they talked a bit more about the PlayStation 5 and some of the unique features. Apparently some big ones we don't even know about yet. 3D audio and the haptic feedback support of the controller are also things that, when you try them, you'll be surprised at how big a change they are. Even just playing the racing game Gran Turismo Sport with a PlayStation 5 controller is a completely different experience. While it runs well with the previous controller, there is no going back after you experience the detailed road surface via haptic control and play using the adaptive triggers. But you know, there are still more unique elements for PlayStation 5 to come that separate it from previous consoles. The bigger differences have yet to be announced. So I do like the idea, of course, of haptic feedback. We have that with the Joy-Con controllers, the Pro controller. I think it is way better than having to use the massive rumble motors that just go crazy whenever something happens in a game on the Xbox or the PlayStation 4 currently. Yes, the Switch, the HD rumble is much better. I get that. So it's cool to see the PlayStation 5 doing the same thing. Microsoft should be doing it as well. Makes sense to me. The adaptive triggers, that should be pretty neat as well, to see that the tension will change as you're pulling down on it depending on what's happening on screen. He's talking about Gran Turismo. I assume that's like if you're pushing the pedal down, or maybe if you go into a wall or something and it's fighting you a bit, maybe that kind of plays around with the trigger. A lot of stuff there. But then he goes into unique features, and this is the thing that I'm noticing a lot about the PlayStation 5. They briefly mention graphics and some other stuff, but then they kind of go over to unique features that will separate it from other consoles. I almost wonder if this really will have something to do with VR being baked in some way to the PlayStation 5, because it's something they focused on the PlayStation 4. They managed to move 5 million units of the PlayStation VR, which is very good in the world of VR to have that kind of seller. They've seen Oculus Quest start to pick up somewhat. So the VR market, believe it or not, it is expanding with a lot of these headsets coming out. So I do wonder if one of the unique things he's referring to has to do with the PlayStation VR 2 having some sort of technology also built into the console, kind of to help out, maybe eliminate that box. But outside of that, it's hard to say. But I have noticed that they are talking less and less about the power of the PlayStation 5 and more about other things, unique features, as they're saying. It does kind of make me feel like, yeah, it's probably not going to be as strong as that Xbox Series X. But I do question, okay, if it's 10.5 teraflops, how much different is that going to be from 12, like when we're in practice, when we're actually using it, you know, especially with the art styles and the talent from Sony Studios with things like God of War. You would never know the PS4 base is significantly weaker than the Xbox One X or even the PS4 Pro. So I think they can save some on the power and try some different things and make up with it for the talent of their studios. So interesting stuff there. But now I'm really curious, and you'll have to let me know, what unique features are they talking about for a home console with the PlayStation 5? Next up, let's talk about AMD at CES very quickly. I was hoping they would have some big-time video cards there to showcase some of AMD's the raw power that they are going for towards the top end, challenge NVIDIA somewhat on their 2080 Ti. They did not appear to do any of that. No, they kind of went the opposite direction. They more or less targeted the 1660 Ti from NVIDIA with their new 5600 XT that is due to launch this year and all of that, but they showcased it as a $279 card that appears to be set very, very well for 1080p. They had a bunch of slides up where, of course, it was beating the 1660, but we've seen this before where it's very controlled environments. It's definitely slighted towards AMD's card or NVIDIA's card, whoever's showcasing it. I am a little disappointed though. It is a 7.2 teraflop card. I'm more or less disappointed that they didn't have anything massive for a video card to necessarily show off, and we saw a 5600 XT. I was pretty confident we've been talking about some crazy card they would have shown off here, but this is what we had. They did show off some pretty serious CPUs with their Ryzen line, which is great for anyone who's maybe not as much gaming as they are doing a lot of processing for videos and rendering and other things. Their Ryzen chips are still pretty good for gaming, but it's pretty clear when they walk out on stage with what, like a 24 thread or a 24 core 48 thread, something insane, right? Yeah, that's probably for workstation stuff, but 5600 XT, you know what, looking at it, I'll be curious what the benchmarks look like, because at $279, that could end up being the card to get at that price point, but I more or less want to see people who are more independent, we'll say, put it up against the 1660 Ti, and while they're at it, they might as well throw it up against like the 2070 and others. And in our last bit of news, let's talk about Dragon Ball Z Kakarot. I'm waiting for this game badly right now. I want to play it. I'm a big Dragon Ball fan, of course, and this is due out next Friday. It's going to be on the PC, Xbox One, PlayStation 4. I think I'm going to grab it on the Xbox One X. PC is the obvious one to do, right? Because it's, I mean, I'm sure a 2070 Super will push this game around no problem, but I am always curious the performance on current consoles, even in the Pro and the X consoles, just to see how it does. But I was definitely looking for any type of reviews that I could get my hands on to see how it actually did with critics, and we got our first review. This is from Famitsu. We're gonna take a look here as Nintendo Everything did post the scores. They also posted the scores for Yakuza Like a Dragon, as you're seeing here, a 9, 9, 10, 10. You know what? That is a very good score of 38. That is really, really good for a game that fans weren't overly excited for, because they're shifting, of course, to an RPG, like a JRPG style for Yakuza, and it is definitely a massive break from what they're used to, but I like the idea of changing it up and trying something different there. Interesting that it still did very, very well with a 38. Very, very cool to see there. Dragon Ball Z Kakarot with a 9 and 8, a 9 and 8, making it a 34, which, you know what, for Dragon Ball Z and what I was expecting, that is, I think, about right. I don't think this game is going to review overly well. Like, if I had to give it a Metacritic, it'll probably be high 70s, low 80s at best. But for me, a fan of Dragon Ball Z, I'm excited for an action RPG that's going to, yes, go back through the same story, but according to them, it will kind of go into some different side stories and missions that kind of expand on parts of the story, and they've even done things like introduce new character. And we're hearing that the playtime of the main story is roughly 35 to 40 hours, which apparently, if you try to do all of the side stuff and everything in the game, it can get upwards of 80 hours. So yes, I'm excited to check this one out. They had a full trailer. They keep putting out trailers, by the way. The last one they put out was kind of the progression system for all the different characters, and I'm just ready for this. Next Friday, a score of 34, probably an average Metacritic. That's fine. I just want another Dragon Ball Z game, and it looks like we're at least getting a fairly good one next Friday. And we'll finish up the comment of the day, as you're seeing here. This one's from Jim, saying, watch the extra stuff be like a Mario hat that you can equip on Dante or something. I had the idea of it being like a costume item or something from Nintendo. However, people started to point out that there are a few things in some of the screenshots that are being shown, and some people are now believing that we could have one part being the ability to change styles on the fly, which is a cool idea, I think, but I don't know if they will take anything from Nintendo and put in here. I think it's all going to be within the universe of Devil May Cry, but 3 different dates tells me that there are 3 different pieces of information they want to share with us. Could be some gameplay stuff, could be full-on extra content, but I like the idea either way of it not just being Devil May Cry 3 throwing on there. I love the idea of trying to add some extra stuff to it for Switch owners. Ladies and gentlemen, let's go to here for Newswave. Enjoyed this video, guys. Hit the like button, really helps out. If not, hit the dislike. Leave comments down below about everything we talked about today, whether it's that Hyperkin Gameboy Advance console. What do you think about that? What do you think the price needs to be? All right, and what do you think about, I guess, the controller being like their proprietary Super Nintendo controller? It's got to be wireless, right? Like, if you're gonna hook up to your flat screen, you want to be able to sit more than like 6 feet away with a USB cable, I would assume anyway. Also, what do you think about the scores for Dragon Ball Z Kakarot and, of course, Yakuza Like a Dragon, and then PlayStation 5 Unique Features? What else could they come up with? Because adaptive triggers kind of came out of nowhere for me, so I guess at this point it's anyone's guess. Thanks, guys, for watching, and I'll see you next time.